it takes discipline to keep working in a slow way like this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I know a lot of people, and like humans generally think in a way of how can I speed this up so I don't have to work as hard, and that's not something that I really do.
Mm-hmm.
I I put great effort into staying really in touch with the material that I work with.
I'm very pleased to have Nicolai Schorr as my guest on this week's episode of Life with Strings Attached. After studying art for 6 years and playing and performing music for a decade, Nicolai dedicated himself to handcrafting guitars in his own unique way, with a unique voice and design that focuses on tonal and visual clarity. Featuring domestic woods, chalk paints, and oils, even his hardware and pickups are handcrafted by Schorr in his own unique way in his workshop in Berlin. I've very much enjoyed my conversation with Nicolai Schorr, and I hope that you do as much as I did.
Hello, Nicolai. It's great to have you
Hi,
on Life with
Jamie.
Strings Attached. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for great to be here, and thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, wonderful. How are things in Berlin?
Yeah, pretty good. I'm a little bit tired. Met a friend last night, so I didn't go to bed as early as I should. But other than that, things are going well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds to me like life in Berlin.
Hmm.
I,
I mean, you say that, but I'm I haven't been regularly going out for like probably. Well, we've been here for 13 years, so probably the last 8 years I haven't really been going out regularly because, well, coincides with the guitar making in a way also. But
mhm. Yeah,
in the beginning, I was working in a bar and I was more attached to that culture, but I'm kind of
sure.
not anymore. So,
Yeah. But
but it is Berlin life in a way. It's true. Yeah,
Berlin has a
it's
strong
definitely
nightlife,
true.
right? Like a late night.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. It's like whenever I'm out during the weekend at night, I see all those people and say, "Oh yeah, okay, right. It's a big city after all." It's during the day, and you don't really get to see that. So it's or when you go to a show or something, there's so many people everywhere. It's crazy, but
Yeah.
it's good, right in the
Yeah.
middle.
Yeah.
Mm.
As you move from culture to culture, realize the idea of what's normal, of course, changes. And so,
Obviously, yeah, sure.
where I'm from in Canada, we eat our main meal at night around 5 or 6 p.m. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but when I'm in Italy, dinner time
Yeah,
starts
it's
at
more like
9 p.m. and
yeah,
when
sure.
Canadians are going to sleep. And so there's a much different
Yeah,
idea of when you see people in the streets, when restaurants are open. I've many times as I
that's
was
true.
early in trying to travel, I would find myself unable to eat because I didn't understand there was a window of opportunity for dinner at this time, and then all the restaurants close. And in North America, we
Yeah,
have this kind of always open, always ready for business kind of mentality. And so
yeah.
I remember a very indignant French woman looking at me. I think it was maybe 2:30 in the afternoon, and we'd been in a museum, and we
Mm-hmm.
lost track of time, and we were looking for lunch, and we came in. It's
Yeah.
open, but only for coffee. And I said, "Do you know a restaurant can
Mm,
open?" And she looked at me sort of with a
yeah.
condescending tone and said, "McDonald's." Like
Yeah.
basically, like, you fucking idiot.
Why
Like,
would you want to eat now, right?
yes.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
Mm,
anyways, it's yeah, lessons learned. And so, uh, I've been in Berlin a number of times, and most people I know in Berlin
sure.
have some sort of a nightlife, and I just realized it's one of those cities that lives a little later than other cities. That's all, I think.
Yeah, but it also allows for all kinds of things, right? So we usually have dinner pretty early, and like I I get up at like 6:30, so I have to be in bed usually by I don't know like 11 or something because
Hmm.
I need my sleep. Because
Hmm.
the work I do, if I'm too sleepy and can't concentrate, then I'm either going to hurt myself or the work I do. So it allows for all kinds of stuff. Like so people with different cultural backgrounds. You hear the kids on the street at night at like 10 or whatever,
Hmm.
and others, put their kid to bed at like 6 or 7. So
Yeah,
it's all here, and it's all simultaneously in a really nice way.
yeah,
So
yeah,
there's space for everything.
yes. So the whole time that
Mm.
that I've known about you, because we don't know each other very well. We've met a few times and such, but
Yeah, sure.
um,
Mm.
the whole time that I've known about you, I know is I've considered you a Berliner. But you mentioned a moment ago that you
Mm.
moved to Berlin. So
Yeah,
where are you from initially?
I'm originally from Bremen,
Hmm.
which is it's that's like an hour from Hamburg, so it's northwest Germany,
Hmm.
uh, like 4 hours from Berlin. Yeah, that's where I'm from, and that's also where I studied. And so my partner and I moved here together, like in yeah, like when was it? 2011, I
Hmm.
think.
And when you say studied, you
Yeah.
studied fine art, correct?
Yeah. I studied fine arts. I got a diploma in fine arts, so I studied for 5 years, and then I did a master's after that for another year.
Mhm.
And yeah, so yep,
Great. A master's
that's why I did.
in.
Oh, it's. I mean, the master's thing. It was like I guess it's the post grad. So I did a
Mhm,
diploma in fine arts, and then another year, just the same thing, basically.
mhm,
So
mhm,
I was doing drawing and painting, and towards the end, I was doing a lot of music also, which didn't really fit with the studies, but also studying fine art, it was very open, so you were basically on your own time all the time. So
mhm, mhm.
um, I started getting really into music and playing, writing, and so when I did my final show for the post grad thing, I basically stopped the painting and started just doing music after that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm.
Hmm. And did you come to Berlin for music, for fine art, for both?
Yeah, I mean, so my partner Anna, she's a painter
Hmm.
and does drawing. So like I originally wanted to study fine arts in Berlin, but I didn't get accepted because I think, well, I wasn't really doing the best stuff. It wasn't bad, but I didn't really know what it took to get into a really good school.
Hmm.
So I'd been wanting to move to Berlin before that, and when Anna and I got together, at some point we had this idea to, because Bremen was, it's like a 500 600,000 people kind of city town. It's like on the edge,
Hmm.
and it's pretty nice, but it just became a little bit small for us. See the same people all the time.
Hmm.
Um, there's very limited opportunity for things, and so we thought it would be a great adventure to move to Berlin, which is, if you live in Germany and you go to Berlin, Berlin is not really Germany. I mean, in a lot of ways, it kind of is,
Yeah.
but in many other ways, it really isn't. And so it was really the only place we could imagine living, other than where we already were, which I guess we couldn't really imagine living there much longer. So
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
um, so it was kind of moving far away, but in the easiest possible way, because it's still the same country, if you know what I
Sure.
mean.
Yeah,
And nobody
absolutely.
can afford to live in New York or anything. So
Right.
I mean, many people can, but also a lot of people can't.
No, even the people living there can't afford to many times.
That's true. Yeah, that's a fact.
They
No.
just get used to the weight, the burden. They don't realize
Hmm.
how much easier it would be if they lived somewhere else. Often.
And I get it. I've only really been to New York once, but it was like, um, it's a really, really beautiful place to me.
Mhm.
So much going on, like the like all the tall buildings, like all the crazy shit that's built there, and like it's just a mad thing, but it's so beautiful at the same time, in a
Mhm.
way,
Mhm.
to me
Mhm.
anyway.
That's
Yeah, so
interesting.
I get
There's,
it.
yeah, New York is unlike any European city for sure. I'm born and raised in Toronto, in
Yeah, I've
Canada,
never been there. Mm.
and Toronto is not so very different than New York. We also have large
Okay.
skyscrapers, and it's a large city, and of
Mm.
course it's different, but not different like Berlin is different from New York, or that
You're
Paris is
right.
different from
Yeah.
New York. And
Mm.
so, to me, I didn't have quite the same experience when I first came to New York that you were explaining, but I've heard many
Mm.
Europeans explain it that way. And in the
Mm.
early days of New York, also, I've read books from Raymond Loewy or Constantine Brancusi, and these are people who came to New York, spent a lot of time in New York, and they talk about the
Mm.
impact that experience in New York was for them coming from
Mm-hmm.
the old world, and that
Mm.
Loewy had a career in New York and would, when he first got there, he would try and get up as high as he could to get a lay of the
Mm.
land to sort of reset himself because he couldn't quite comprehend the
Yeah.
world anymore when you're down at the bottom of all of those what he called
Mm.
skyscrapers because they were. But he's also talking about 1940s, 1950s New York, which
Right.
is nowhere near as
Mm.
tall as the buildings are today.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah,
Mm.
it is a beautiful,
Yeah.
interesting place. Hmm.
Our host in New York, shout out Costa. He was working downtown Manhattan, and in this in this glass really high building, and he took us to check out the view at night, and it was it's crazy. I think it's just, you know the U.S. is a like it's is a is a is a country that's really extreme in many ways, and New York is a really extreme city. And I think just being in Manhattan and seeing all this stuff built on top of each other, and the layers, it's kind of a almost like a sign of that in a way, and it's really just really interesting, and very very beautiful to see in a way, because I guess it's very human. I mean, there's also really bad things about it, of course, but it's just really impressive. And I think I don't know if you've never been, it's also you've seen a lot of New York because of films and stuff, growing up. So there's all these images that you already have, and then it's suddenly it's real life, and it's yeah. But I actually I had the same, like when we visited Budapest a
Hmm.
few years ago,
Hmm.
going across the river. I had the same feeling. It's the same kind of this kind of dense. I guess a river has to be involved in some way
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
it's just more impressive when there's buildings and a river. So
Yes, a
just
clear
something for
starting
that kind of
line.
structure. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I
yeah.
guess so.
Where
Yeah,
it ends and where it begins. Yeah.
yeah,
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 New York is that way, Chicago's that
mm,
way, Toronto's that way, because they're,
yeah,
again, cities that are built on large bodies of water. You're exactly right. Yeah.
mm,
They also create
yeah.
tremendous traffic problems when you have
Of course.
a lake or island or rivers to deal with. So all those places
mm,
are known for having horrible congestion in their traffic. But,
mm,
it's interesting, this idea that Berlin is Germany, but not Germany, because actually, I think that
mm,
every country has those cities. The French, I think, feel the
mm,
same way about Paris. And
mm,
there are certain states also, like in Texas, there's
mm.
Austin and there's the rest of Texas. And the
Right.
rest of Texas
Hmm.
doesn't feel like Austin is Texas, and Austin doesn't
That's
feel like
true.
the rest of Austin,
I've
is
heard about
Texas, and so
that.
on and so forth.
Mm,
And
mm,
it's true. And New Orleans really doesn't represent the rest of Louisiana either, and so on and so forth.
mm.
And so there's
Right.
always these little islands of culture within a culture that
Hmm.
that define themselves differently. That's a
Yeah. Also, I mean, Berlin. Sorry, Berlin obviously is also really used to being kind of like an island, right? From the after the war and stuff. So,
Mhm.
it's also a long tradition, kind of in Berlin, I guess, to be like a to be like its own thing,
Mhm.
separate from everywhere else. Being
Mhm.
relatively free within that. I don't know. It's just, yeah,
Yeah,
just a
it's
thought.
interesting to think about why these things exist and how the isolation happens. And in the old world, it's a little easier to see. You go to somewhere like Venice, and well, Venice was basically its own country, its own space,
Mm,
and so the it's not hard to understand why the Venetian culture is different from the culture in
mm,
Rome or even Milan, which is much closer to Venice, because
yeah.
it had separation for centuries, right?
Right.
And isolation.
Mm,
And the
mm,
major centers, even in the New World, Chicago was really built up because it was strategically placed. It was kind of the point that you could get to before the great open wilderness of the West. So it was a major
right.
distribution center. So it had lots of money and it built up
Hmm.
in a way and developed its own culture. And the culture was also
Right.
defined by the people and the music and the culture coming up the Mississippi River up towards there, which is
Mm-hmm.
why Chicago, so far north, has a blues culture. It's because the people
Right.
from the south brought the music up the Mississippi River, from
Yeah.
Louisiana and up to Memphis and to St. Louis and up to Chicago. And
Yeah. Of course. Mm.
so, anyways, it's interesting to see how these things develop, and then ultimately how
Mm.
they. One of the things that I often have thought about is what it takes to create something very unique. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
isolation is actually one of those things. That isolation has created very unique food cultures. That
Mm-hmm.
Australia is so very different than the rest of the Western world because it's so very hard to get and leave Australia, to get to and
Mm.
leave Australia. And
Right.
there are species of animals that are on the island of Madagascar that are so distinctly different. And it took the isolation to
Mm.
get there. And the
Mm.
musics that have developed
Right.
because the music couldn't travel so fast to somewhere else.
Right.
So the music in Memphis was different than the music in Atlanta, which is not so very far away in modern day, right?
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
but there was a different culture, and then the food culture is different from one spot to the next because it was laborsome and expensive to move from one spot to the next.
Mm.
And in the modern world with distribution where you and I are talking in real time,
Mm.
quite far apart from each other.
Well, I
I
don't know where you are, but I assume.
yeah, well, we're actually in the same time zone. I'm in Italy right now, in Tuscany.
All right, yeah. I was wondering if you're doing this like late at night. I was like, damn, what a soldier! Like,
No, 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 I'm not. um, Actually, you're one of four interviews today. It's first thing in the morning for me, and I'll have one, two, three, four.
okay, all right,
But by the end of the day, I'll be talking to someone who's on the Pacific Coast time at 9 or 10 o'clock
yeah,
in their morning.
that's
So
smartly scheduled.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Right.
and it was this idea of it's a bit of an incubator, right? So it's a bit of a
Mm-hmm.
incubator when you have parameters that are set by finances, complications of travel, whatever it happens to be that keep you in one space.
Yeah.
And I really
Mm.
wonder if we will be able to develop sophisticated styles of new art in a way
Mm.
that music scenes developed in the past, or that even painting. The
Mm.
Impressionists were all hanging out together. They found
Mm.
each other and they discussed, because Impressionism really is a philosophy. It's an idea that is expressed, on a canvas, but there's
Well,
no
although I
there's
wonder
no
if that's not something that's got attached a little later. I'm sure when the people were exploring what they were doing, it wasn't fully formed yet as ideas. I'm not sure about that, but I would assume, having been a painter myself, that
Mhm.
the kind of the journey kind of on the canvas is first, and then you kind of think about it after that. But maybe that's not it.
Yeah, I don't know the
I'm not
exact
sure.
timing of it, but I do know
Yeah,
that what
me
we
neither. I'm
call
just
the
saying.
Impressionists today were a group of
Mm-hmm.
friends in Paris who
Mm-hmm.
got together regularly at the cafe and discussed,
Right.
the
Of
the
course.
the institution of art at the Salon in
Mm-hmm.
Paris and how they were not accepted in it, and
Mm.
ultimately one of them was accepted. The story of Manet was
All right.
accepted with his painting of the prostitute Chloe, and it
Mm-hmm.
created almost a riot. They had to put security around the painting so that people.
All right.
This is hard for us to understand today in the modern world that people would be so upset they were concerned about rioting by looking at a painting. But they did. They put security around it and eventually
Mm.
moved it to the depotoir and skied it towards the ceiling so that people weren't
I've def- I, mm,
bothered
I've
by it.
definitely
So.
seen paintings that made me want to riot. So,
Yeah, but I mean, seriously, you have to put security around it and remove it from the
of course, I'm
space.
just joking.
And then, for our listeners who don't know the story, I just want to wrap this up quickly, is that
Sure.
ultimately they rented their own space. They rented their own gallery. And we're talking about Monet,
Hmm.
Manet, Degas, Cezanne, like really
Yeah.
the heavies of the Impressionist era were all together and they put on a show and they called the show The Impressionists.
Of course. Yeah.
And now,
Hmm.
historically, we think of all of this, but they were actually together. They were actually discussing, and they actually put together the monumental show that changed
Hmm.
the world of art. Um, together.
Which obviously wasn't monumental at the time. I mean, when they were putting it together, of course, they probably thought they were doing something good. But it's like nowadays, there's also lots of artists that can't get a show, and they get together and they make a gallery. You know, it's still
Yes.
happening. And if you get lucky, and you know, you're kind of in the zeitgeist or whatever, or like right in front of it or whatever, then things can just explode, I guess. You know. So. I think those are things that can't really be controlled. It just happens or it doesn't. It probably was more likely to happen back then because there was just less stuff around. You know, like if somebody's doing something great now, it's really much harder to get any recognition for it, because even to get people to look at something for long enough to actually see what it's about is a challenge. So, you know.
Yeah, I agree. Although they were in a very deep, I don't remember the numbers, but there might have been
Mm.
as many as like 60,000 painters living in Paris at that point in time. It was a really the
Mm.
center of the art world, and was really difficult to get your name and get any
Yeah.
success because there was a lot of
Mm.
competition, you know.
Mm.
And you did have to stand out and
Sure.
succeed at making a noise and drawing attention. And so that's a great segue into your work, because actually uh, you did exactly that. The very first time I ever saw one of your guitars was at a
Mm.
Holy Grail guitar show. I believe the
All right.
first time you, was it your first guitar show? I don't,
Yes, yeah, it was that year I did two guitar shows. My first
Mhm,
was the Holy Grail show, and then I went to Montreal to the Sonore,
mhm.
which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. That was
Yeah,
also great, very small but very great show.
yeah.
So, yeah,
Hmm.
that was my first exhibition, and I got a
Yeah.
really good table too. Shout out to the board of people deciding that. I was like right next
Right
to
at the
Saul
front on the
Cole.
left, I remember. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, really exposed. That was a crazy weekend. Yeah, one of the more crazy weekends of my life, I would think.
Yeah, you couldn't get near your guitars. As a matter of fact, I think we had a very brief interaction. I talked with
Yeah,
you
I
for
think you
just,
waved at me or something.
no. I came by, I tried to play your guitar, and you were like,
Right.
"Yeah, I might not remember this exactly correctly, but the impression I'm
Yeah.
left with was that you said,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I'm not really in the business. I'm an artist, and I don't really want to talk about that."
Not sure
you
if I
you
said
brushed me
that.
off
Maybe.
basically, which doesn't happen to me very often.
Yeah.
But it was I don't, I'm not upset by it, and I wasn't upset then, because I'm always just trying to see if there's something
Well,
I
if
can
you were
help with.
still upset after so many years, you should have said something before, because I
Oh,
don't
I'm
remember
not.
that.
I'm not upset at all. But it was interesting because your guitars
Yeah.
were so very different, and it's very
Hmm.
clear that you were not tied to the history of Lutherie, and with your mind that you had to do something in this way, and
Hmm.
you were really
Okay.
very
Yeah.
free in what you were doing with the guitar making, and so
And also very limited. I think that's as much as being like you said earlier. Limitation was one of the, even like, I think I felt even, okay, it's hard to say. I was going to say I felt more limited than free, but also that limitation gave me a lot of freedom. And I was, when nobody's expecting you, you're also kind of free, because
mhm.
you don't have to carry any of that expectation, right? A lot of people feel like they have to carry a lot of expectation from others, which is also their own a lot of times. So I didn't have all of that. That's true.
Yeah, and you came up with some really interesting solutions. A very, very creative approach to it. Do you mind, for our listeners who aren't familiar with your guitars? They're very unusual. Can you tell us a little bit of what led to? I think the owl is your first design, the one you're most famous for, maybe, or is it something else?
I had a different design even before that, and I
Okay.
exhibited one of those, but it was called Neptune.
Hmm.
But that was just a set neck, small electric guitar,
Hmm.
basically. So yeah, so I would say the thing I'm probably mostly known for is the owl guitars. There's now there's actually 4 variations. It's kind of like a platform. So there's the owl, which is the electric guitar.
Mm-hmm.
There's the owl, which is the semi-acoustic guitar. And there's an owl bass.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also an owl arch top now. And it's all based. It's all called the owl because it's the same shape, basically, or derived from the same shape. So when I was starting to build, I had this idea, and that's what the owl was. This idea of kind of an acoustic guitar as a solid body, which, I mean, it's not nothing crazy, but so the idea was if it's an acoustic guitar, which obviously it's not, then the body has kind of, I don't want any electronics in the body.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea was to lift the electronics off the body, and that just became kind of a visual feature.
Mm-hmm.
It also because I wasn't working with routers at all, it solved the problem or my limitation of not really being able or not wanting to cut huge holes into the guitar body, etc. So so the elevated electronics out of the body. Then I was doing a sliding pickup, which was something that I knew from like the Framos Hollywood guitars from the 50s. It was like small, solid, actually hollow body, but small guitars with a sliding pickup.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's tons of other sliding pickups. There's also this diamond thing for arch top guitars. So I was inspired by that, and I was wondering why nobody was doing it, because I thought it's an interesting feature to be explored. So I was working on that, and the third thing I was doing was having a neck that's attached to the body in a way that you can manipulate the angle of it, and thus having a fixed bridge height and being able to change the string height with the neck angle, which is something I was really inspired by Rick Turner and his work with the How Om neck joint for that, and Ken Parker, I think at that point also already, and Stauffer neck joint, all that kind of stuff. So I was doing things either out of limitation of having no space, having no tools that every other guitar builder basically has, and also out of looking a lot of times way back into the history of the instrument, and also looking where other people weren't really looking. So at that point, European stuff, I think there was already people were already looking at it, but I was just looking at other places, I guess. And that and I think all of that kind of defined what I was doing, and to a large extent what I'm still doing.
Yeah.
I hope I answered your question there.
Yeah, you did. I just wanted to know more about it.
Okay,
It's you're one of the few German guitar makers that I don't have a very long history with. And so I've known most of the notable German guitar makers for decades at this point in
right.
time, and we've had a lot of dinners together and a lot of conversation, many hours walking around little German towns and such. And I don't have the benefit of that with you, and so I would like to know a little bit about it.
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Prominence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com.
It's interesting that you think about the owl as sort of the shape and a bit of a platform with that, because one of the things I've noted is that guitar makers do go through a period where they establish their canvas, and then they more or less decorate it for years afterwards, including most of the very notable. Someone like a Jens Ritter, which was very adventurous in his early years, has more or less settled for. He hasn't released a new guitar body now in probably
mm,
15, maybe 2012 was the last time he made a new guitar body or something of the sort, or 15, somewhere around
yeah,
there. And
mm,
I don't mean to say anything negative about that, but now he has an established body of work, and that body of work is primarily painted or decorated. He explores brocade fabric and all sorts of different things. But
yeah,
there's a period. Uli Teufel is the same way.
yeah,
Even though he's very creative, he's experienced. There are four things that he makes, four shapes, four concepts,
mm,
and then the options become decorative. And every guitar maker you can think
mm,
of, with very few exceptions, and those few exceptions are people like Claudio and Claudia Pagelli, Thierry
mm,
Andre, Michihiro
mm,
Matsuda, but we can name them probably all in one hand. The people who really continue to explore different body shapes. Do you have any thoughts
yeah,
on that?
yeah, sure. I think one of the main things about that is, and I'm experiencing that at the moment, is that I feel like I could actually leave the owl alone in a few. Like I've been feeling that for like a year.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't really. I still really enjoy making them, and they've become really good guitars in my mind.
Hmm.
Something that I would say is actually a really good instrument and
Hmm.
a very unique instrument. But I'm a pretty adventurous person when it comes to doing stuff with my hands. In terms of like, I've got like right now I have, I think, a really good idea for something new.
Hmm.
But it's just when you get orders for that guitar, and then you've got orders for like half a year to a year
Yeah.
or something.
Hmm. Hmm.
You have to make those guitars, and you want to make those guitars obviously because they also pay your rent, and they also,
Yes.
you're in touch with really friendly, really respecting and supportive people
Hmm.
who
Hmm.
you also want to make happy,
Yeah.
and you also want to do good work. So all these things can kind of keep you trapped with a shape,
Hmm.
with a certain way of doing things for longer than you would naturally maybe be inclined to, I think.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's something that I'm really familiar with in the last year, I would say. I had a time when I was really feeling that, and was kind of like feeling that in a I would say not so great way. And then and it's funny how that also is connected sometimes to like when you get a new order in for something that you think you could actually leave alone, you're actually really happy. It's like
Hmm.
because you have
Hmm.
work. So
Sure.
that's this guitar building is this really interesting mixture of stuff.
Yeah.
It's got this thing that I can still feel like I am an artist because that's my background, and I still
Hmm.
do
Hmm.
artistic work, but also I don't make any art, at least not with the guitars, right?
Yeah.
So it's and it's also what pays my bills. So it's a really interesting mixture of things,
Hmm.
and I think it's pretty hard to navigate actually, learning to leave space to develop stuff. That can be a good idea or a bad idea. Like a few years ago, I did a solid body version of my future guitar, which is
Hmm.
fully hollow, kind of jazz, big kind of jazz guitar in a weird way.
Hmm.
No, I mean, yeah. Um, and I spent a lot of time on that. And I had a guitar ready, and I ended up cutting it apart after having it for half a year because I was just not feeling it. I did a lot of really interesting things on that, I think,
Hmm. Hmm.
but in the end it looked like uh, a new guitar that has really nothing special. So
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
gotta let that go. You know,
Yeah.
just because you made it doesn't mean it's good.
Yes.
Not always, anyway.
Yeah. You know, you
So.
touched on there the sort of circumstantial guitar maker or
Mm,
happenstance, we might say even. And
mm,
and there's a number of people who I know who have a successful guitar business that
mm,
it wasn't necessarily their intention. to be a guitar maker. Another
Ah.
like
Mm-hmm.
Robin Strumval with the Verso guitars. Robin did an industrial
Mm-hmm.
design degree. He made the Project to guitar,
Yeah, I know.
and then there were all
Mm.
these orders. And next thing you know, well, I guess I'm a guitar maker now, right? Like
Yeah.
it wasn't really his total
Yeah.
intention to be this way, And I think that
Yeah. I have a
probably
lot of respect for Robin. Yeah.
yeah.
We've
What
Robin and I were saying like we really like what each of us is doing,
mhm.
but we couldn't be working in a more different way from each other.
Yes.
It's really interesting. So
Yes,
yeah,
yes. But
he's a cool guy.
he is, and a really, really lovely person. Um,
Hmm.
and then Lenny from Daddy Mojo. I
Yeah,
think Lenny is also one of those people who he's a very talented painter as well. Um,
I know. Hmm.
but the guitar orders just keep coming in, and that's what really I think really what pays the bills. I don't know how many paintings he sells. Maybe he makes more money on paintings. I have no idea. But I get the impression that he could also relate to what you're saying. It's nice the
Hmm.
orders keep coming. It's a way to be creative and a way to
Hmm.
sustain your life. And
Hmm.
this mixture of art and business is a hard one for artists to navigate. And
Yeah, I mean, I started building guitars because I thought it might be something that I could live off of.
okay.
I don't think I knew that when I was building the first one, but when I had made the first one
Hmm.
and I felt like doing another one,
Hmm.
I was in financially in really complicated or not no dire circumstances
Yes.
for a long time,
Hmm.
and so and you can tell by me choosing guitar making then as the alternative. So which in the way I do it is nothing um, that will make you rich, but it's a good way to spend your time and with the possibility of paying your bills, so
Yeah.
that's good.
Yes. I mean, that's the equilibrium that guitar makers find. It's as you
Mm.
said, you're not going to get rich making guitars. At least most people won't. But it's meaningful to you. You enjoy doing it. You like your
Every
life when doing it, and that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all I think all people that made a lot of money from guitars
Hmm.
were inclined to industrialize and kind of um, give away part of their work, what was their original work, and exchange it for something different. And I think a lot of people are not willing to take that step, and I think that's fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Sure. And I've heard some of the bigger names in guitar making who are making thousands of guitars at this point in time, talking with a guitar
Hmm.
maker who's making maybe a smaller amount, more than you are, but a few hundred guitars,
Hmm.
and say, "Oh, that was the
Hmm.
sweet spot. I can't go back to there, but
Hmm.
I wish I could be there at that spot." That there was a
Yeah, is
certain
that
amount
like
of
Kawa guitars? Maybe that's how much they make, right? I'm not sure though.
yeah, yeah. He makes over 100
Hmm.
guitars a year.
Yeah, exactly. Hmm.
But I won't say who the two guitar makers were talking. But if I said their names, everybody would know who the two guitar makers were. But it was a private
Hmm.
conversation, so I shouldn't say it. But
Hmm.
nonetheless, there is that sort of ideal space to be, and there's a good amount of. I think Sheldon Dingwall said it best to me, where he says, it pays good dividends in soul currency.
Hmm. Yeah, it does. Unless you have to be careful though, because um, I think guitar building is a really like if you have like a tunnel mentality,
Mhm.
it's a really dangerous thing because there's many things that you can get really, really, really into, and that can really fuck with you in a bad way. I think you have to if you don't make many guitars, you have to make sure that they're not too cheap.
Mhm.
You have to make sure that you don't work too much. I think
Mhm.
because you want to be able to sustain it,
Mhm.
and you also have to. For me, the way I do it is I'm in charge of everything, and that's good
Mhm.
for me because everything that I make is me. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm up to the point where it leaves with ship and goes into shipping or whatever. It's
Sure.
I feel that's an important aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I'm curious when you say, it can really sort of fuck with you as to what experience. Do you have an example of? How do you mean that?
Well, I tend to try to change stuff all the time,
Hmm.
and changing stuff always leaves room for maybe it doesn't work,
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if you change something on the fly and then you realize, oh, maybe that wasn't a great idea,
Hmm.
that can be really bad. Or like deciding what rabbit hole you want to go into. Like if you get a request for something that's really out there, and then you put a lot of research into something and you're not paid for it, and then the order doesn't go through, for example, stuff like this. You have to be
Hmm.
the longer you are working in this profession, if
Yeah.
it's not like I think in the beginning all the energy is there and it doesn't matter what you do because you have so much energy. At least that was what it was for me. Like
Hmm.
when I started out, I was working in a bar 3 nights a week and I was building full time. So it was crazy how much energy I had then. I don't think I'll ever have that much energy again. But so you have to kind of choose your battles in order to not lose sight of, you know, um, for example, making guitars that are already ordered, and
Hmm.
you can't go after the exciting stuff all the time because you can lose a lot of time doing
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
Let
Yeah,
me
the
put it that way.
development side of things is complicated. I've actually had that part of the conversation a few times in the last week or two, in
Mm-hmm.
very different scenarios. So,
Right.
um, one of my one of my clients in my consulting work, dealing with another very large company, was they needed a small amount of their product, but they needed a lot of research and development on it. And the company
Mm.
buys a lot from them and didn't want to pay for the development of that particular product. And
Mm.
that's a conundrum for them because it's a big
Sure.
customer, but
Mm.
whose cost is the development cost at that point, right?
Yeah.
And so for you, the same thing.
Mm.
And I had there's a leather maker. I guess a cow is a leather maker, a leather worker,
Mm.
here in Tuscany, a few minutes from me, that I was talking to this week. And he also said early lessons that he had to learn was someone would come up with an idea and talk about it. He'd get in his workshop, he'd just start making it. No deposit, no
Mm.
guarantee he was gonna.
Mm.
And then in the
Yeah.
end, he doesn't end up selling it to them
Dangerous.
because he started on the project before he had a deposit or a real commitment from the customer. Not that it's necessarily the
Yeah.
customer's fault either. You just have to get to the point where you're willing to sort of say, we can do this. It's going to cost this. Do you want me to do that? And the answer is
Mm.
money or not. Like
Yeah.
that's really the answer, right? Will you pay for this when it's done? And if they say, let
Mm.
me think about it, that's okay.
Mm.
It's the customer didn't tell you to go and start and then not pay you necessarily. Sometimes that can happen, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's a challenge when you're excited and you're very creative and it's a good idea and you want to do it. You get in there.
And you're also thankful that somebody approaches you and wants something from you, right? Because you're
Yes,
dependent on that. So you're really thankful and you get all this energy because somebody wants something from you, right? And
yes.
then you also, it's a personal contact. So you might think, oh, we're already friends.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's a very complex relationship in a way.
Hmm.
And but the potential customer always has the possibility to just not reply to your latest email. And
Yes.
it I get that. I don't get that with people that I've written with a bunch of times,
Hmm.
um, but I get quite a few um, emails where I reply back really friendly and I don't hear again from the people.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, they have the right to do that, but I think it's still kind of messed up.
Hmm.
Because if you're asking for an information, the way I work is if I ask for something and I get a reply, I say thanks, not for
Yes.
me, or thanks, but I can't afford it, or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but it happens, and people are free to do whatever they want, and they're not your friends yet. Some become friends over time, I would say,
Yeah.
but it's you got to be careful to not assume so much.
Yeah, I agree. It's a issue of integrity and accountability, I think. And those are
Mm,
terms that sound old fashioned now. And I don't think that they should ever go out of fashion. But but there's a certain amount of integrity to someone who takes the time to say, thank you for your time. They recognize that there's
mm,
value to who you
yeah.
are and your time, and then
Mm,
says, I'll think about it, or it's not for me right now, or, ooh, I can't
mm,
afford that. Hopefully one day, something of a response
mm,
is a sort of
mm,
integrity that I think is really important, but has somehow
mm.
become a little bit more rare
Yeah,
at this
I've actually
stage.
I've just taken my first order from Australia, and
Hmm.
I was writing quite, like, I would say, like a little bit more emails than usual for a new order with the person, but
Hmm.
then he wrote like that I've been very friendly and that that's really important to him,
Hmm.
and I was like, oh, that's cool. He appreciates that I've been, you know, taking time to reply to everything he's asking about. And but I still wasn't assuming that it's going to happen.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
can still, it can still just vanish.
Hmm.
But I was the more happy when he actually decided to go forward with the order. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
it's a good thing.
Something that I've noticed in our conversation so far, Nikolai, is that you say things like grateful and happy
Mm-hmm.
and friendly, and I think
Mm.
that you appear to be someone who practices gratitude and recognizes the good things in the world, and it's nice to hear. I'm grateful for your
Thanks. Yeah,
gratefulness.
yeah. I just I guess that's just the way I am. Um, but I'm just trying to make sure that even if I have had a bad day, it's really not anybody's fault but my own a lot of the time.
Hmm.
So, and I realize sometimes, in relationships or whatever, it's a little bit harder to not make the other person feel that way. But if it's like somebody I don't really know that much, I try to just be respectful and friendly. I often write things like, and I actually mean that, like, thanks for your support.
Hmm. Hmm.
When somebody writes something nice to start the email, I thank them for the kind words because I
Hmm.
think it's really, they don't have to do that. I get so much praise from people that don't even know me,
Hmm.
for my
Hmm.
stuff.
Hmm.
So I think it gives me a lot of energy also to give back in that way, which is like the easiest thing because you could say it's just words, but
No,
it's a good way to start a conversation.
it's really important, and it's something that uh, I don't think I try and do, but it's something I do quite often also. So I will thank someone for what they do, thank them for the work they're
Mm,
doing and such. And
yeah.
I'm often struck by the response of people because many people,
Mm,
you can tell they're not used to being thanked. They're not used.
mm,
They're not used to someone
yeah, that's
saying, "Hey,
true.
thank you for what you do." They don't
Mm,
know how to respond. Um,
yeah.
and I think that it's not such a hard thing to do. And I think that people, many of us are indeed thankful for what someone else is doing, and we don't give it voice. And that it's nice to give it voice. It's nice to hear someone else say that,
Mm,
say thank you. It's nice to see somebody do a kind gesture for someone else. And
mm,
I think all cultures around the world, we elevate sacrificial acts, somebody taking their energy and giving it to someone else to, you know, in the little squares here, there's many cafes here in Italy, and there's a number of elderly women who were gathered together, and another one came in, and I saw her coming very slowly.
mm,
I saw her coming, and that there's not an extra chair at the table where her friends that she's already talking to are. And I just stood up
mm,
and put a chair from beside that table to where I presume she's
mm.
going to sit. And
Yeah.
all of the old ladies were like, oh, gentilo.
Mm,
That it was
mm,
some extraordinary act. And really, it took me, I don't know, 7 seconds to stand up and move a chair to do something nice for
mm.
someone. But people's
Sure.
reactions show just how uncommon it actually is. And
Mm,
so I guess this is me noting how much you have said things like that and thanking
mm,
you for it. So thank you for your
mm.
kindness.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, it's just the way I am, I guess. I
Yeah,
can also be not kind, but I try to be,
we all can.
it's all like it's also I know I'm very privileged, the
Hmm.
way I'm allowed to live.
Hmm.
So um, I don't feel that in every movement that I make, but
Hmm.
I know it's there a lot of the time. So a lot of people don't get to do what I do, and though it's a pretty intense and hard life sometimes, it's I'm still really happy for all the all the choices I can make and
Hmm.
all the opportunities that I get, um, which a lot of people don't have. So
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know,
Are you serious about the business of guitar? Then you need to join us on Patreon. We're building a future where guitar makers are able to live prosperous lives making instruments that inspire the musical experience, which helps to create a more beautiful world, where others who are passionate about the guitar can thrive. Those who help in the promotion and resale, trade shows, writing of books and articles are supported as a valuable part of the community. A community where we explore with curiosity and encourage those around us in their endeavors. With a community effort, we can accomplish far more than we can individually. So let's be serious about your guitar business and join us on Patreon at patreon.com/business of guitar. That's patreon.com/business of guitar.
Your work is lovely. And I really mean the
thank you.
world. I really mean the word lovely because when you look at your work, there's something light, pleasant, happy sort of feeling. But your
Mm,
colors are often pastels and lighter colors. They're everything. It's when we want to make a happy picture, and don't take this the
mm,
wrong way. When we want to make a book for
mm,
children to make them smile, we might make
mm,
shapes that are something similar to the shapes that you make. We might make colors that are
mm,
something similar to the colors you make. And so there's something very playful and very joyful
mm,
about your work. And I'm very interested in
mm,
that because I've had conversations with other, let's say the artistic guitar makers. I had a
mm,
conversation with Adriano Sergio about
mm,
his love of Giacometti and how uncomfortable I am seeing a Giacometti sculpture. I appreciate it, but it
mm.
makes me uncomfortable, and I don't like the
Yeah.
uncomfortable side of things. I had a similar
Yeah,
conversation
I
with
think I listened
Julie.
to that one actually. Yeah. Mm,
Yeah, and I had a similar conversation with Giulio Negrini because he dives into this sort of demonic and gross. He brought this huge
mm.
cockroach to the NAMM show, and
Okay.
it sold right away. People loved it. It's a very interesting thing. But I'm uncomfortable with the
Oh, so it was a
grotesque.
guitar.
Yeah, yeah. So he brought.
Okay, I thought it was a real cockroach.
So he at the NAMM show, I always commission four guitar makers every year to make an installation piece,
Right.
and it grounds the space. They're kind of like you might
Mm,
imagine when you approach the pyramids, there are the sphinx that prepare you for
yeah.
where you go, right? And they draw you in. And so I Giulio did one of these a couple of years ago,
Right.
and
I
what
don't
he
think I saw that. I saw what Mike Sankey did, but I didn't see Julio's. I
so
have to check that out.
Giulio's was like this huge, like dead cockroach arms, like massive, and the
Okay.
guitar was inlaid with many cockroaches and millipedes and worms and rotting things. Very
Okay.
fascinating because it was also done in pearl and abalone, which is
Mm,
an interesting juxtaposition as far as material and subject matter is concerned. Um,
right.
and he
Like the
did
Damien Hirst thing. Mm,
yes, and he did a great
mm,
job. Um,
mm.
but for your work is so very much the opposite of that. It's
Yeah,
light
that's
and
true.
pleasant and lovely, and so. Um, is that does that seem about right? Tell me about that. Is that who you? Is that just who you are? Have you always been that lovely person making lovely
No,
things?
no, not at all. Like the drawings and paintings that I made were much darker,
Hmm.
and I'm not. I mean, I'm a pretty like. I like dark music. I like nice music as well, but not that much. And
Hmm.
I'm I'm not really like like that. I think the lightness comes from. It has a lot to do with the themes that I work with. Um, the actual idea of lightness, the actual idea of simplicity and space, and I think that's part of it. I would agree, and I thought I really like that what you said about the shapes with the
Hmm.
children's books, because I think the owl, for example, it is in its own way a very iconic shape,
Hmm.
um, which is also cartoon-like.
Hmm.
So, and I think also the other shapes they're kind of exaggerated a little bit. So also like the future with the straight lines and the
Hmm.
offset, and it's like they're almost like exaggerate, or the Uloy, my newest electric model, which almost looks a little bit like a cartoon guitar in a way, because it's an exaggerated shape.
Hmm. Hmm.
I guess you could say that. So that makes sense. I'm not sure if it really represents me as a person. Maybe it represents a side of me that all the hard work is in the making, and then the product looks like what's left, which is the nice, friendly stuff. So
Hmm.
maybe
Hmm.
it's I leave the other stuff in the shop. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, now I'm very interested to know what's in the shop. What's in
You
the
wouldn't want to
closet of the
know.
dark things?
Yeah.
So,
No, but it's just a lot of time to myself, working pretty hard with hand tools,
yeah.
working slowly. Like it's not it's a lot of fun, but it's also pretty hard work.
Hmm.
And it's not fun all the time. And it's also it takes discipline to keep working in a slow way like this.
Hmm.
I don't I know a lot of people, and like humans generally think in a way of how can I speed this up so I don't have to work as hard,
Hmm.
and that's not something that I really do.
Hmm.
I I put great effort into staying really in touch with the material that I work with. So it's just a decision that I made really early on.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's not always. It's not always. Um, not every step is fun. But
Yeah.
it has to be done.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I'm so distracted
It's
by
like
your.
writing an invoice. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so distracted by the forbidden work now. So let me take a little side trail here for a moment. On the weekend,
Mm,
I had family here. My son came to visit. He's the tech on the show, actually,
mm,
Zach, and
yeah.
and we did some work together last week here in Italy. And my wife had heard that there's an old library here, but you can't get into it unless you know somebody, and then
Mm,
someone will come and unlock it for you. And I kind of thought it was just one of these old buildings that's locked up and dusty that no one goes into.
mm,
So I thought it's going to be interesting. They have manuscripts from 700 or 800. It's very old.
mm,
Uh, a-
mm.
and but I didn't put a lot of. When I got there, I realized, oh, it's very, very different than I thought. And a
Okay.
professor from the university lets us in.
Mm,
There's more than 12,000 books that were donated in the 15th century, sort of medieval period.
oh,
Um,
wow.
but it's also where the cardinals come to vote in the new cardinals and the
Mm,
archbishops and such. And
okay.
they wear
Mm,
these ceremonial robes. And there was a painting in the room where they make the votes. They said, we
mm-hmm,
think that one's from Da Vinci, maybe one of his students. But
mm,
and it's like, oh,
yeah.
and when we went up into the library, it was really
Mm,
remarkable space, really
yeah.
beautiful and interesting. But I found out that they have one of the original Divine Comedies from Dante, and they
Mm.
don't. It's not on display. They bring it out
Of
only
course.
special times. And so the
Mm.
professor put on white gloves and went out and brought out. And here I am. And he opens a book and finds the page and then shows us. Here's Dante's handwriting. Here's Dante's
Mm.
signature himself. You
Mm.
know.
No.
And we asked a few questions about the most rare books. He says, "Oh, I'll get you something from the forbidden book section." We're like,
Okay.
"Forbidden books? What?" And he's already gone. And we're talking
Yeah.
amongst ourselves. What is a forbidden book? What is this little bit that we find out? And he comes out with probably the first Koran to ever enter Italy.
Mm.
A monk had gone to Turkey and
Mm-hmm.
he had one transcribed and brought it back. And it lives in the
Mm-hmm.
forbidden books. And so all these books that were burned and that were banned during these times, the writings of heretics and such, the Catholic
Mm.
Church actually kept a copy of each one of these and locks them
Yeah.
away in the forbidden book section.
Mm.
Which someone like Galileo was probably in the forbidden book section and then taken out of the forbidden book section, right?
No.
Another
It's
side note.
revolving doors, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Another side note. We found out that one of Galileo's fingers is on display in Firenze. Guess which one?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, are you serious? Yeah. So we're gonna go see it. So
Mm.
just his middle finger, as if he knew, because he died basically in
Mm.
prison as a heretic.
Right.
And
Mm.
there's his middle finger is on display just to sort of say I was right for eternity. But anyways,
That's pretty good. Mm.
all that just so I could say forbidden book section. And Nikolai, I really want to
Right.
know what's in your forbidden guitar section. I want to know what dark secrets are back there that don't look like lovely guitars.
Well, not really many. Like, I have basically all my prototypes. I have a thing where I tested my neck joint for the arch top,
Hmm.
which is basically a piece of top wood, two blocks, but it's just this white, so it can have the strings on, and then there's a neck attached.
Hmm.
Um, I have one or two things that got kind of destroyed because I prototyped other stuff on it. Like I made this handmade vibrato bridge
Hmm.
for the owl. So I cut up another guitar that I still had to fit it in there and stuff. So that's not nothing nasty really. A
Hmm.
couple of necks that didn't make it, and I think that's it. Yeah, it's
Okay.
nothing like really dark. I mean,
Hmm.
if it
Hmm.
was, I probably wouldn't tell you anyway. So, you know, but it's all normal stuff. I don't. The thing is, the way I work, I don't have much surplus stuff. Like I don't even have an owl in the shop for people to try out because it's when I decided to make a new
Hmm.
prototype
Hmm.
owl, I made a solid body because the hollow body just takes much longer, and it's like, you know, I have usually when I make one, it's an order, so it
Yeah.
gets shipped out. It's a compromise that I kind of have to make, and thankfully, people when people stop by in the workshop, they usually understand. I've
Hmm.
had nobody that was like, "Why don't you have this guitar here?" Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
It's always very understanding people. You
So
know.
so this is the story I've told many times, and I'm going to tell it to you now because I think it's important. Um, because you've had a partner for many years,
Mm-hmm.
and so when the very first Holy Grail Guitar Show happened, um,
Mm-hmm.
there was a Swiss guitar maker who had died the year leading up to the show. He wasn't supposed to come to the
Okay.
show. His name was Rolf
Mm-hmm.
Spuler, and he made a really interesting guitar called the Bird of Paradise. And when Rolf
Okay.
died, I didn't know Rolf very well, but for whatever reason, it impacted me fairly strongly. And
Okay.
I had this thought that, oh, that guitar, that is sort of life's work, that shouldn't go away. And
Mm-hmm.
so I asked the board of the EGB if I
Mm-hmm.
could buy a table at the Holy Grail Guitar Show and put
Mm-hmm.
a Bird of Paradise, a Spuler guitar, on the table to
Mm-hmm.
say that when the luthier passes, let's keep
Mm.
alive the memory
Mm.
of important guitars.
Right.
Um, and so I contacted the Spuler family. They didn't have one.
Mm.
And then I set out on a search to try and find, and I could find some in North America, but nothing within Europe. And then there was an importation.
Mm.
I'm not comfortable with it. And in the end, I actually couldn't get a Bird of Paradise because the Spuler family does not own one of his guitars. And he left
Mm.
behind a wife and children
Mm.
who don't have one of them. And
Yeah.
so I think that when people think about that, many guitar makers are like, oh, I don't want that to happen. And so it's not an unspoken for guitar, but now they keep a guitar, and that guitar is, or sometimes they even make one for their children. So
Mm.
the anniversary Birdfish guitar that's gold, and
Mm.
it was shown at a Holy Grail guitar show, um,
Mm.
was made, and Uli has kept it for his daughter, Paula,
Yeah. Mm.
after him and I were talking about Rolf Spruill, because he knew Rolf also. I know that Omer Deutsch
Mm.
and a number of guitar makers now have made the choice to sort of say, "Oh, yeah, I don't want my family to not have one of my guitars," and so that
Mm.
guitar becomes the guitar that lives there. That people can touch that guitar, they can try that guitar, but also
Mm.
it's a part of the family legacy. Let's say at that point.
Yeah. 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 I mean, for me, it's like I have my personal Owl Archtop, which
Yeah.
is it's always going to be because it's just my guitar.
Hmm.
Because it was the first acoustic guitar I ever made,
Hmm.
and it turned out pretty nicely. So I like to play it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I have the first Owl actually right here. It's this
Hmm.
one.
Hmm.
And I'll
Great.
always keep that because I used to play that, and it's just it's not. I'm not going to sell that because I can just make a new one now, which is
Yeah.
it's kind of different, a little bit different.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you
So,
do have
but
something.
yeah, I have something, but also it's like I don't know if I would care about that much because if the family didn't have any instruments, it also means that all his instruments are with other people, which is also a nice thing. So,
Well,
um,
you won't care about it. You'll be dead. But but the people
yeah,
who survive you might care about it.
yeah, okay, maybe, but
Yeah.
also it's just a guitar. It's not the most important thing. So
No. That's no. I'm not going to let
it's
you
a
off the hook.
it's a
No,
nice
no.
thing.
I'm not going to let you off the hook with that. It's really
Okay.
you think that you dedicate so much of your time, that this is your craft. This is what you do. I mean,
Hmm.
honestly, what what is going to be remembered about you when you pass on in the future? It's hard for us to remember certain
Probably
things.
nothing, to be
Oh,
honest. Oh, sorry, I clipped that.
no,
Probably
go
nothing because it's like the type of work I do.
on.
It's really hard to actually be like, for example, when this they made this book, this 100 guitars book,
Mhm,
and I was really surprised that I was going to be in it,
mhm,
and I think that was great. But usually, the type of work I do, I don't think is like I don't promote myself in a way that is. I think I get a lot of recognition already for what I do, um,
mhm.
but I don't expect to get any more. Really, I mean, I have to get recognition because otherwise I won't sell anything. But I'm not. It's guitars. Let's not like overrate that. It's a cool thing, and of course I want attention for it, but it's not. I don't know if I believe in you know that kind of legacy thing that much.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Interesting,
not
because
sure about that.
yeah. Do you mind if I ask how old you are?
41.
Well, you're very close to starting to think about legacy. Next year. Let's see if you care. We'll see. It's okay. I mean, you're. I don't think you're going to have any sort of midlife crisis because you're already living a life of doing things that you want to be doing. The people who have a midlife crisis, and it usually happens at 42, to be honest, is because not they're not really happy with what they've done necessarily. They start to think about, I did good work, but I did it for the boss. I did it for this other company. What did it really mean in the end? All these questions
Yeah.
happen around the age of 42. I've had a number of friends come to me and for whatever reason they juxtapose their life and my life, and they feel like somehow when they compare, they feel like they're not as happy with what they've done as the choices that I've made somehow with the life I'm living. And so they come to me and
Mm,
they talk to me about it. And it all
mm.
happens right around that sort of 42 sort of mark. And these were fairly accomplished people, to be honest. Um, and we have many people
Well,
like that who
I'll
decide to
tell you
become
about it
guitar
next
makers
year.
in the
But
40s.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. But I don't mean about
I'm.
you. I mean about, listen, for me, the purpose of life is to pass on and to improve. I
Hmm.
mean, this is, if we look at even Dawkins' sort of work, where he's talking about our bodies as survival machines for our replicator genes, right?
Hmm.
And that the purpose is to replicate and be able to keep moving on. And so my replicator genes need me to find a mate and pass on to a new body which they can replicate on, so on and so forth, right? But it's not just that,
Hmm.
it's also the knowledge that we pass on. The knowledge, we make a contribution to our culture, to our families, to our
Yeah.
friends. you know the
Yeah. Of
kindness that
course.
you've expressed, the gratitude that you've expressed are things that you pass on, and we make contributions to our culture and to our world. And
Of course, but that doesn't mean it has to be a guitar. It can be all those things that you just mentioned. And for
yeah.
example, like I've, for example, I've been thinking for a few years about maybe at some point I would be really interested in like maybe making a book or something.
Hmm.
And that the thing kind of changes from time to time. Sometimes I think it's an interesting idea to make a book of how I make a guitar.
Hmm.
Um, and other days I think it's absolutely stupid idea. Anyway, so but I think that would actually be more interesting than an actual guitar, because then you could actually, if anybody thought that was a great idea, they could just make one, you know.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't know, but if I regret all my choices and think I'm getting lost in meaninglessness next year when I'm 42, I will be sure to let you know.
You-
I don't think so though.
no, I don't think you will either. But it is interesting how we move on.
Yeah.
You did express that you had the feeling like you might be able to move on from certain guitar designs. You
Sure.
know,
Yeah. I'm
and
really an acoustic guitar maker, and I don't really get to make acoustic guitars.
okay.
Like all my electric guitars, like I really wanted to make acoustic guitars, but it's just I never felt like I could do that. Like when I was working with my in the beginning working with my mentor Angela Waldner. She's
Hmm.
like a classical guitar maker,
Hmm.
really like super good,
Hmm.
and she was like, and then at some point you want to make a classic guitar as well, right? And I'm
Hmm.
like, I don't think I could ever do that. I never thought I would be able to make an acoustic guitar, and that thinking has really changed.
Hmm.
And of course, I have one now.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but so for the last year or 2 years, I thought that my future would really be in making acoustic instruments,
Hmm.
and at the moment, I'm not really sure, because also I have ideas for other stuff always. And making an electric guitar is also really nice, actually, because making a pickup and all that is fun. And it's also such a nice, still after all these like years, it's so funny to make an electric guitar by hand, because electric guitars were industrial products from the beginning, basically.
Hmm.
And it's just such an interesting, like why would you go through that? Um, Whereas with the acoustic instruments, for me, the energy that you put into them,
Hmm.
you can just hear that when it's done without anything that you need to plug it into or whatever. So that's
Hmm.
always been kind of a modern, or like a simple form of magic for me. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
but we'll see. It's the way I work. The problem is that the guitars get really expensive when they're acoustic guitars,
Hmm.
especially like our art shop. It's obviously a handcraft art shop, so it
Hmm.
takes just so much time to make it. No matter what guitar it is, it just takes so much time to make it. So even if somebody says it's not as great as this guitar, whatever, if they were to say that,
Hmm.
I would say, well, it still has that price because it takes so long to make it.
Yeah.
Like that's just where I am with that stuff. So
Yeah. I mean, there are ways to make a simplified acoustic guitar that sounds very good and plays very good. But in fact, one of my interviews later today is with Adam Buchwald
Of course.
of Irish Guitars, and they make a very
Hmm.
simple, great playing and sounding guitar. Um,
Hmm.
that's really, yeah. I'd be interested to see what you would do with a
Well,
traditional
the
guitar. Yeah,
the guitar I make is pretty simple. It's just
yeah.
that the simple things take a long time if you don't use industrial tools.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
just the truth of it.
Yeah.
It's and it's something that I never had this urgency to get a bigger space and buy machinery and get people in. It's just something that I never felt.
Hmm. Hmm.
As I said, I studied fine arts. I'm really used to being on my own,
Hmm.
finding worth in working something on my own, and then when it's done, that's what it is.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
just I think I'm in a very different mindset than some other people who go into this business.
Sure. I mean, I don't think that
Mm.
that mindset is so uncommon amongst guitar makers. Most guitar makers work by themselves and do things in a very slow and inefficient way. Even the ones who use machines do it in a very inefficient way for the most part, and that's okay.
I
You
think I
know,
work. I
it's
think I
what they
work in a very
choose.
efficient way. It's just the types of tools that I use. I use them pretty efficiently, I would say.
Hmm.
And um, but it's for me. It's just if you're going to spend your day doing something, do you want to do it in the material, or do you want to do it with headphones and a mask and glasses, trying to keep your hands? It's just
Yeah.
for me. It's I just don't like it's for many people. It's great. I'm really allergic to loud noise.
Hmm.
I'm really I can't like yeah. It's just doesn't work for me.
Okay. Well, you know what? That sounds like a really great part of the conversation to continue on the business of guitar.
Yeah. Okay.
So, in a moment, let's go over and do that. But one of the things that I think is really valuable for our listeners here on Life with Strings Attached is just creativity. The value of creativity, I think, is
Hmm.
something that is very difficult to understand. But when we take a moment to reflect on the fact that all of the major religions in the world that have been that I'm aware of, I'm sure there's a few exceptions, but pretty much every major belief system ever has put at the very highest the creator, the person who made it all happen.
Hmm.
The creative act is elevated above everything,
Hmm.
and yet somehow it's hard within academia and within economics for people to understand the value of creativity and the creative
Hmm.
acts. But yet, on a spiritual level, we seem to understand that creativity is the highest order, and so I appreciate those who prioritize that, and I think that it's the primary thing that gives value to what you do. The choice that you're choosing to create something, the choice that you're choosing to do it with your hands in a slow but efficient way. you know, I think that everyone kind of wants to do this, and that many people just haven't found the way or haven't tried to find the way, to be honest. Most people just sort of end up somewhere. And then they
Well,
value the people who are doing it, like yourself.
I mean, you have to make choices, right, and set priorities. So,
Hmm.
and you got to do you. So, the way I am, this was priority number one for me to work
Hmm.
like this. So I accept certain things that I can't have because of that,
Hmm.
right? For example, one really big challenge is okay, so why do I make guitars that I myself wouldn't be able to afford, or a lot of people that I communicate with throughout the world won't be able
Hmm.
to afford probably ever. That's
Hmm.
like one of the big things that I it's one of the things I can't have because of the priorities I set. If I was going to prioritize that everybody can afford my guitar, I would design something, find an investor, and you know how it goes. So
Hmm.
it's just people have to just learn to accept the consequences for their actions, and I think then they maybe would act differently. or be more aware of what they get for what they don't have, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, yeah, it sounds so obvious, and I'm
It's not
reminded.
easy. Yeah.
No, it's not easy.
Mm,
I heard a really
mm,
great perspective recently that said something like, you know, being in business is hard. Well, having a job is hard. Choose your heart.
mm,
Being married is hard.
yeah.
Being divorced is hard. Choose your heart. You know,
Yeah.
and and so on and so forth. They juxtapose all of these things, and I think that you're making it very clearly that no, it's not easy to do what we do and to make these choices, but you choose what that is, and that's and you've chosen a life, and you sound like you're mostly happy with those choices at this point, and so yeah,
Mm.
thank you for making inspiring guitars.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
I hope I'll continue.
for making that choice. So that sounds like a good spot to wrap this up. Nikolai,
Hmm.
is there some question or topic that you had hoped that we would discuss today that maybe if I were a better interviewer, I might have asked you?
Not really. I wasn't really having any set expectations, so I think you did pretty well, and I enjoyed my time. So that's good, and I hope you did as well.
Great, great. Okay, so for Nikolai and I are going to talk for another 5 or 10 minutes on the business of guitar. If you are interested in the business of guitar, you can join us over at Patreon/business of guitar. And that's patreon.com/business of guitar. And we'll have some sort of inside business talk there. For those of you who join us here on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, thank you so much. Nikolai, thank you for being on Life with Strings Attached. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it as well. Bye bye.
Thank you for watching and listening. You can find more episodes wherever you listen to your podcasts, and a special thanks to those who support us on Patreon. It's your support that enables us to do this work.